I used to be the "we'll see" kid in my family. Not the favorite, not the disaster. Just the one people talked about like I wasn't fully real yet. At Sunday dinners in my mom's townhouse in Naperville, my Aunt Denise would pat my shoulder and say, "You'll land on your feet," like she was talking to a stray cat that kept showing up on the porch. My sister Brooke got called driven, my brother Tyler got called gifted, and I got called sweet. Sweet is what people say when they don't know what else to say. Back then I worked 2 jobs and did my little side thing at night, building a small online business while everyone else watched Netflix. I'd show up tired, hair in a messy bun, hands smelling like coffee from my shift, and they'd tell me to slow down. It sounded caring, but it always came with this look, like my hustle was embarrassing, like I was playing pretend. My dad, Rick, loved to say, "Nobody gets rich honestly," then laugh like it was a joke. The funny part is he didn't say it as a warning. He said it like a rule. My first real break didn't look flashy. It was just a contract, then another, then a steady stream of clients. I moved from my tiny studio in a rougher part of Chicago to a clean 1-bedroom closer to the lake, and I finally stopped checking my bank app like it was going to bite me. I got a used SUV that didn't make weird noises. I stopped saying no to basic stuff like a dentist appointment. I didn't announce any of this. I didn't do a big "look at me" post. I just started living like I could breathe. The thing is, my family noticed anyway. They always noticed money, even when they pretended they didn't. The first time my mom came to my place and saw the view of Lake Michigan, she got quiet in a way that didn't feel proud. She walked around touching everything like she was checking if it was real. "This is nice," she said, but her mouth didn't match her eyes. When she left, she hugged me too tight and whispered, "Don't let it go to your head." After that, the tone changed fast. Not in a dramatic movie way. In that slow, petty way that makes you doubt yourself. At the next family dinner, Brooke joked, "So how many people did you step on to get here?" Tyler laughed and added, "Careful, she'll invoice us for dessert." Everyone laughed like it was harmless. I laughed too, because that's what you do when you don't want to be the sensitive one. But my stomach went tight, like my body understood something before my mind wanted to. It got worse when my mom started telling people my business. Not details, just enough to make it sound like I was swimming in cash. My cousin Janelle texted me, "Heard you're doing really well, proud of you," right before asking if I could spot her for rent. Aunt Denise started calling me "boss lady" with this sing-song voice that made my skin crawl. Even my dad began treating my success like a problem he needed to solve. He'd ask questions that weren't really questions. "You pay taxes on that? Are you sure it's legal? You got someone helping you hide it?" And that's when I noticed they weren't calling me Maya as much. They started calling me "you people" when they talked about money. "You people think you're too good for us now." Or they'd say my name like it came with an eye roll. "Maya's busy. Maya's got important things." Like I'd become a stereotype overnight. The real moment it hit me was on a random Wednesday, not even a holiday. My mom called while I was in a Target parking lot, sitting in the car with a bag of toiletries and a cheap candle I didn't need. She didn't ask how I was. She went straight to it. "Your father thinks you're acting different," she said. "He feels like you're pulling away." I stared at the steering wheel, confused, because pulling away from what? From being the family's backup plan. From being the one they could laugh at. I told her, "Mom, I'm just working." She sighed like I was being difficult. "Well, you know how it looks," she said. "You have all this now, and you don't share. People are talking. People. Not family. Not love. People." I drove home with that word sitting in my chest. People are talking. Like my life had become gossip currency, like my bank account had turned me into public property. And by the time I pulled into my garage, I already knew the next dinner wasn't going to be jokes anymore. It was going to be a conversation, and I could feel it coming like bad weather. The conversation happened that Sunday, right on schedule. Same long table, same roasted chicken, same arguments about football and gas prices. The only difference was the way everyone watched me, like they were waiting for me to slip up. My mom kept refilling my glass even when I didn't want more iced tea, like she needed to keep her hands busy. Brooke was smiling too hard. Tyler barely looked up from his phone, but he was listening. I tried to keep it normal. I asked my dad about his new knee brace. I told my Aunt Denise I liked her new haircut. I laughed at the usual stuff. But then Brooke leaned back and said, "So, what's it like, being rich?" She said it like a dare. Like I was supposed to either deny it or confess to being a terrible person. I didn't want to play, so I just said, "I'm doing okay." "No," she pushed, still smiling. "Like, really? Because Mom says you're making crazy money." My mom's face flashed, just for a second. She hated being caught, but she couldn't stop herself. That's how she was. She loved information more than she loved peace. I took a breath and said, "I'm comfortable. I worked hard for it." Dad finally looked at me. "Comfortable," he repeated, like it was a dirty word. "Must be nice." Tyler snorted. "She's probably got some fancy accountant telling her how to keep it all." That's how they did it. They didn't clap. They didn't ask what I built or how I built it. They treated it like a trick I pulled on them. Like I'd cheated at a game they didn't even know we were playing. And then, like someone flipping a switch, the talk turned into all the things they suddenly needed. First it was little. Aunt Denise brought up her credit card bill like she was making conversation. My cousin Janelle mentioned her car making a weird noise. My mom said the roof was getting worse and made this dramatic face like the ceiling might fall at any moment. I started to see the pattern before they even said the words. They were circling. Brooke finally went for it. "I just think," she said, "if someone in the family has extra, they should help. That's what family is." I looked around the table. Nobody argued with her. Nobody said, "That's not fair." They all just waited for me to agree, like the answer was obvious. And I could have helped. I'm not heartless. But the problem wasn't the helping. It was the entitlement. It was the way they were rewriting our history, like they'd always supported me, like they'd been the ones lifting me up. In reality, when I was broke, nobody helped me without making me feel like a burden. My mom used to remind me of the $200 she lent me in my 20s like it was a lifelong favor. Brooke once laughed when I said I couldn't afford a bridesmaid dress and told me to just put it on a card like everyone else. So I asked, calmly, where was that energy when I was struggling? Brooke rolled her eyes. "Here we go." Dad set his fork down hard. "Don't get dramatic," he said. "We raised you. That's enough." I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. They didn't want to talk about love. They wanted to talk about debt, what they thought I owed them for existing in their house when I was a kid. Like I should spend the rest of my life paying off a bill I never agreed to. My mom jumped in, voice sweet but sharp. "Nobody's saying you owe us," she lied, then immediately added, "It's just sad you don't think about anyone else." That one landed. Because that's the knife they always used, making you feel like a bad person if you don't do what they want. I felt my face get hot, and for a second I wanted to scream, to list every late night, every sacrifice, every time I showed up for them when I had nothing. But I didn't. I just said, "I do think about you. But I'm not going to be treated like an ATM." Silence. Real silence. The kind where you can hear the refrigerator hum. Tyler finally spoke, low and annoyed. See? This is what money does. It changes people. Brooke nodded like she'd been waiting for that line. Exactly, she said. It makes you selfish. And there it was, my new name. Not daughter. Not sister. Selfish. Like it was stamped on my forehead. I left not long after, claiming I had work. My mom followed me to the door, whispering like she didn't want the neighbors to hear. Just think about what you're doing, she said. You're turning your back on us. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes weren't begging. They were warning me. And that's when the truth started to settle in, their love wasn't about me. It was about the version of me that needed them. The broke me was safe. The successful me was unpredictable. Driving back into the city, I didn't cry. I was too angry to cry. But I kept hearing Tyler's voice, this is what money does, like my hard work was a disease. By the time I got home, I wasn't just hurt. I was alert. Because if they could flip that fast, if they could turn me into the villain that easily, then they were already telling a story about me somewhere else. I found out how bad the story was when I walked into it by accident. A couple weeks later, I stopped by my Grandma Ruth's place in Elmhurst to drop off groceries. Grandma Ruth had this tiny kitchen that always smelled like butter and coffee, and she still kept a candy bowl by the door like I was 7 years old. I was stacking bananas on her counter when I heard voices in the living room, my mom, Aunt Denise, and Brooke. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I wasn't supposed to be part of the meeting. I stayed quiet, not to spy, just because I didn't want to interrupt. Then I heard my name. She thinks she's better than us, Brooke said, like it was a fact. She doesn't even call anymore unless it's convenient. My mom made a sad little noise. It's the money, she said. It got to her head. I don't even recognize her. Aunt Denise chimed in, dramatic as always. I knew it, she said. The minute she started making real money, she started acting like we're beneath her. It's like she forgot where she came from. I stood there holding a bag of rice, frozen. Because none of that was true, not even close. I called my mom all the time until she started answering like I was bothering her. I invited Brooke for lunch twice and she forgot. I sent Tyler a birthday gift and he never even said thanks. But in their version, I was the one who disappeared. Grandma Ruth, bless her, didn't fully buy it. I heard her say, maybe she's just busy. That girl always worked hard. And my mom's voice changed, less fake sadness, more irritation. Busy is one thing, she snapped. But she's different. She doesn't share. She has all that money and she just sits on it. There it was again. Share. Like my bank account was a family potluck dish I was refusing to put on the table. Like I was hoarding something I stole. I stepped into the living room then. Not with a big entrance. Just me, standing there with grocery bags like a normal person. They all froze, and for a second nobody knew what face to put on. Brooke's cheeks went red. My mom's eyes darted like she was calculating. Hey, I said, keeping my voice calm. I didn't know you guys were here. My mom forced a smile so hard it looked painful. Maya, she said, like she hadn't just been tearing me apart. We were just talking about you. Yeah, I said. I heard. Grandma Ruth looked between us like she wanted to disappear into her recliner. Aunt Denise started acting offended, like I was the rude one for overhearing. Well, she said, if you don't want people talking, maybe don't act so. So what? I asked. Brooke jumped in fast. So cold, she said. So distant. You used to be humble. Humble. Another word they use like a leash. I put the bags down slowly and said, I'm not cold. I'm tired. There's a difference. My mom's eyes narrowed. Tired of what? She asked. Of your family. No, I said. Tired of being punished for doing well. That should have been a moment where somebody softened. Where somebody said, okay, maybe we've been harsh. But that's not what happened. They doubled down, like admitting they were wrong would cost them something. My mom crossed her arms. Nobody's punishing you, she said. We're just disappointed. In what? I asked. That I'm not struggling anymore. Aunt Denise laughed like I was being ridiculous. Listen to her, she said. So dramatic. Money really did change you. And then Brooke said the part that made my stomach drop. People are saying you're greedy, she told me, voice low like she was warning me, like she was doing me a favor. People are saying you think you're above the family now. People again. This invisible crowd they kept hiding behind. I looked at my grandma's little living room, old family photos on the wall, holiday cards stuck into the mirror frame, the same couch that had been there since I was a kid. This place was supposed to feel safe. But standing there, I realized they'd already made a decision about who I was. They had built a version of me that fit their fear. And that version wasn't a daughter. It wasn't even a person. It was a threat. Because if I could become financially free without them, then their control didn't mean anything. If I could set boundaries and still be okay, then all the guilt tricks stopped working. And if I didn't need them, then what were they? That's when it clicked, the story wasn't just gossip. It was strategy. They were shaping how everyone saw me so that if I ever said no, I'd look like the villain. If I ever protected myself, I'd look selfish. If I ever walked away, they'd already have the explanation ready. I picked up my keys, nodded at Grandma Ruth, and said, I'll come back later, Grandma. Love you. On the way out, my mom called after me, you can't just leave when things get uncomfortable. I didn't turn around. I just said, I'm not leaving because it's uncomfortable. I'm leaving because you're not being honest. And as I walked to my car, I could feel it in my bones. They weren't just mad that I had money. They were mad that I had options. And now that I'd heard the story they were spreading, I knew the next part wasn't going to be about hurt feelings anymore. It was going to be about control. After that day at Grandma Ruth's, something in me shut off. Not in a dramatic way. More like a switch flipping quietly. I stopped rehearsing explanations in my head. I stopped thinking about how to say things the right way, so nobody would twist my words. For years, I'd been trying to sound reasonable enough to earn fairness. I finally understood that fairness was never on the table. I still showed up for a while. Birthdays. A barbecue at my parents' place in Aurora. A random lunch Brooke invited me to that felt more like an interview than a meal. Every time, it was the same pattern. Someone would make a comment about money, I'd explain myself, and they'd use that explanation as proof that I'd changed. If I said I was busy, I was distant. If I said I was careful with money, I was greedy. If I stayed quiet, I was arrogant. There was no version of me that didn't offend them. One afternoon, after my dad sent me a long text about how family doesn't put price tags on love, I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. I realized I was exhausted, not from work, but from defending my right to exist the way I was. So I didn't reply. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. That silence bothered them more than any argument ever had. My mom started calling more. Brooke sent passive messages like, guess you're too busy for us now. Tyler posted vague stuff online about people who forget their roots. Normally, that would have pulled me back in. This time, it just confirmed what I already knew. At the next family gathering, I didn't explain myself once. When Aunt Denise joked about me being too important, I smiled and changed the subject. When Brooke asked why I hadn't helped with something she clearly expected me to pay for, I said, "I'm not able to do that," and left it there. No speech. No guilt apology. Just a full stop. The room felt different after that. Heavier. Like everyone was waiting for me to crack, to fill the silence with excuses. I didn't. And for the first time, I saw it clearly, my words had never been the problem. Their expectations were. Walking out that night, I felt strange but steady. I wasn't lighter yet, but I wasn't drowning either. I had finally stopped playing a game I could never win. Once I stopped engaging, their frustration turned into something sharper. Concern became accusation. Questions became assumptions. My mom started telling people I was being secretive. Brooke said I'd become calculating. My dad warned me, out of nowhere, that money isolates people if they're not careful. It wasn't advice. It was a threat dressed up as wisdom. The real break came when my mom asked me to co-sign a loan for her and my dad. She framed it like a small favor, something temporary. When I said no, calmly and clearly, the mask slipped. She didn't argue the details. She attacked my character. She said I'd lost my values. She said I was choosing money over family. She said she didn't raise me to be this way. That conversation ended with her crying and me sitting on my couch, phone pressed to my ear, realizing she wasn't upset about the loan. She was upset because I had the power to say no, and I used it. That scared her more than any financial struggle ever could. After that, the comments got louder. They questioned how I made my money, hinted that I must have cut corners, suggested I thought I was smarter than everyone else. Tyler told me, half joking, half serious, that people like me fall hard. Brooke said she hoped I didn't need anything someday, because karma has a funny way of working. But underneath all of it, I could see the truth. They were afraid I'd stop showing up altogether. Afraid I'd stop needing them emotionally the way I already didn't need them financially. Afraid that if I walked away, they'd lose the story where they were the good ones and I was the problem. I didn't announce boundaries. I just lived them. I answered calls when I wanted. I left conversations when they turned ugly. I stopped sharing details about my life that could be used against me. And with every small act of self-protection, their anger grew, but so did my calm. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. And that shift changed everything, even if they refused to admit it. It took me longer than I like to admit to accept what was right in front of me. My success didn't destroy my family. It exposed the parts of it that only worked when I was smaller. When I stopped needing approval, the relationship had nothing left to stand on. I used to think love meant endurance. That if I stayed patient enough, explained enough, gave enough, things would even out. Now I know love without respect is just control with a softer name. And respect was something I had never been given once I stopped being useful in the way they preferred. I didn't cut anyone off in a dramatic way. There was no final fight, no slammed doors. Just distance. Fewer calls. Fewer visits. More peace. The space hurt at first, especially on quiet nights when I missed the idea of family more than the reality of it. But slowly, that hurt turned into relief. Today, I still love them. I just don't let them define me. I don't carry their labels anymore. I'm not selfish for protecting what I built. I'm not ambitious for wanting stability. And I'm not a traitor for refusing to be controlled. I finally understand that becoming financially successful didn't make me the enemy. It made me free. And in a family that survives on obligation and guilt, freedom will always look like betrayal. I can live with that. What I couldn't live with anymore was pretending that my growth was something I needed to apologize for.